Hi, Danielle.
Hi, Mel.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, the day started off a little bit of a challenge because we had a leak at home and we're trying to work out why the walls were crying.
Right. Yeah. This morning, you and I were talking about before we got on here. I woke up in a bit of a mood that couldn't be defined, where you have to use these little things that we've discussed in our other podcast about, what is it that you do to before you even get out of bed to help align yourself to the place you want to be through the day, which is perfect, as both of these instances really bring us into the card that we're discussing, which is the strength
Yeah,
card. It
true.
is, it's true,
Just made
like,
that connection. Yeah.
yeah. So same. That's why I even brought it up. It's like one of those moments where we all have these. We all have these moments, have these days where it is up to you to carry a level of strength within you that you've built
Yeah.
up, so that these things that are going on outside of your control aren't completely wrecking all the work you've done.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's you can have the same situation, but sometimes for me this morning, I'm actually, 150 miles away from my house. And so it's my son that's texting me saying, Mum, we've got a leak. And is it a river or is it a drip? And he's sending me pictures. I can't identify what this is. And you're in that place of, how do I use my own strength to remain calm and composed in a situation that I can't walk into and resolve, and help him to be empowered to have the conversations to deal with it. So as of an hour ago, that's what he was doing. So
It's
it ties
interesting,
in
isn't it?
nicely, isn't it, with the
Yeah,
fact that
typically.
yeah,
Yeah, I love it. We've been noticing that every card we've done under this Major Arcana has been very representative of how our day or week has been going as we've been cycling through these, and it's been a
yeah.
very interesting journey so far.
It's definitely cycling on exactly the day that
Yeah.
we're recording this. And yeah, so this is the next card in our series of the Major Arcana. And this is the Strength card. So, Danielle, as you normally beautifully do you want to introduce us to what the Strength card actually is about?
Absolutely. You know how I love this stuff. So our strength card is going to be the eighth card in the journey of the Fool. So you're walked through a lot of the inner world, and now we're really starting to be in these testing grounds of how we are responding or reacting to the world outside of us. So this is all about mastering our raw emotions, so that we remain calm, or as I often say, we remain in the center of the wheel. Um, it's typically going to be inner issues in response to what's going on.
Mm.
It's all about strength, determination, and power. And it's a kind of a lesson in the human spirit can overcome all inner turmoil. So the strength card is feminine in nature. So it's all about receptivity, how we're receiving, how we're going to be reacting in this, how the inner, if you've listened to any of these before, whenever we're speaking feminine energy, we are speaking in how the within ourselves, inside of this air zone, inside of this mental clarity. And then when we're talking masculine, it's how we're putting it into the world, how we're taking the steps, how we're manifesting things on a very tangible level. So with it being a feminine, we're speaking about the inner strength, how we're receiving, how we're reacting. It's the ruling planet is the sun. And if you've watched any of our tarot series, or any of our moon series, you'll know that the sun is a Leo energy. And so we think of Leos as determined, shining, clear of any shadow kind of vibration. The element in the strength card is fire, so fire, we think passion, we think getting the job done, we think, how are we going to light this inner fire with, for ourselves. Um, with the strength card, it's definitely not a physical strength.
Mm.
You know, we really have to think about strength that's coming from within. How is, you know, the mental acuity, the emotional strength, the not letting life beat us down. How do we stand back up? How do we stand straight? How do we walk with a grace that we're all so deserving of having? You know, these are, you know, the strength comes in to really say, you know, the world is going to go through its ups and downs, and there's going to be a lot of things that you can't control inside of that. But what you're doing is mastering the emotional toll that it takes within you.
Yeah, because some of the practical examples of that are everyday lives, aren't they? You know, in your family, because on the card you've got the lady who is holding the jaws of the lion, and the lion representing animal instincts, gut reactions, and raw emotions. And often raw emotions are tapped into either when our beliefs are violated, or boundaries are violated, or something happens within the family, and several of the children are having meltdowns or arguments. And we've done podcasts a few times, haven't we, where in the background all of a sudden your children are happily playing, and then all of a sudden this screams.
Yeah.
And if anyone that I've witnessed showing some inner strength like this card,
Yes.
it's been through at those times.
Yes. Yeah. Or even my animals sometimes who just cannot
Mm.
help but go into a barking fit because I saw a bird run across, or fly across the window or something like that. Yeah. The way we react or don't react to the outside influences that are not in our control, because outside influences are not in your control, then that really shows the building blocks of this inner true strength that we all carry. What was it? Encanto. Have you seen that movie yet? So it's just this beautiful Disney movie that they've just put out. And if you're a parent of any child under the age of 12, you've probably seen it a million times. If you might have heard the song, we don't talk about Bruno, no. It's like a whole thing. And anyways, what it was there was this one who has physical strength. And because of this physical strength, they just assumed she was strong, period. And inside of this movie, her character really starts to show this vulnerability about, sometimes I hurt, and sometimes things are heavy. And sometimes within me, I want to scream and I don't want to be strong, but because I'm so strong, I have to be. And so she was a really good example of how this strength card comes into play when we realize that it's beyond a physical level here. This is not a masculine card. This isn't a feminine card. So this is about the inner strength, about how it is, sometimes the greatest strength we have is that vulnerability. Sometimes the greatest strength we have is to allow ourselves that moment to cry, or that moment to take the deep breaths and use that breath work or that meditation that we've been practicing, or to go take that shower or walk out in nature. Strength comes in many forms, and it's what builds those reserves within you that is the truest strength. We don't have one set way to create strength within us, but there are ways that we can create within ourselves that help us find that strength. Sometimes things get really heavy, and I go and take a walk out in nature, and nature is just the most beautiful medicine. I don't know anybody that doesn't walk outside on a nice day and just automatically feel a little bit better from within, no matter the weight of anything you're carrying. A deep breath from outside air and paying attention to the birds flying and the noises that are coming from the natural world will bring you back into this moment of, okay, I think I've got it now. So there's just plenty of ways to help build those reserves of strength. And when the strength card comes into your world, it's really asking you to find those ways that work for you, find those ways that help you build those reserves, so that when life happens, because life happens, that you can take that and use those lessons you've been teaching yourselves through these first 7 cards as the Fool, and say, okay, I've built up all of these inner reserves. Now, how do I use this?
The interesting thing that you say about the film, though, because it's usually male characters within a film that is seen as physically strong, isn't it? And the passing sort of assumption that, you know, it's physical strength only. Yes, it's the inner strength that somebody also needs to have, because you know, male or female, and we talk about polarities all the time, don't we, in terms of the way that the world is created. Is this passive receptive female who somehow is allowed to show the vulnerability or manage the raw emotions that they've got, but the male is meant to be strong and sturdy and stoic, and can't go to those places of vulnerability. And thankfully, you know, I've seen in the last decade or so that that's starting to change with the emerging culture, you know, in
Yeah,
terms of
we're starting to decondition as a society. You know, and of course there's reasons that it was put in this way so long ago. You know, there is natural attributes to the male body that makes them stronger physically. And because the focus had to be on that, it just created this entire, you know, centuries worth of conditioning that has just now started to come to the forefront and say, hey, you know, this masculine energy can only get us so far. We need to be able, because, you know, again, if you've watched pretty much any of our episodes where we talk about masculine or feminine, we have both within us. This is a dual world. It just shows the split in a very real way in this world by having a masculine and a feminine. And but within us lies both, and you have to build up both reserves in order for you to have this whole experience, to be whole inside of this experience. And we can have all the physical strength we want, but sometimes things can't be done physically. Sometimes it requires a different kind of strength to really push through. You know, I'm thinking grief right now, things like, you know, pushing through grief. You can't physically push yourself through grief. This is going to take a lot of that strength from within to push yourself into this journey, to understand that journey, to get to the other side of that journey. And that is not something that a physical thing can do for you.
And grief being one of the sort of really tough experiences for anyone to go through, is it does rely, as you rightly say, on that inner resilience and strength, and not everybody realizes the level of which they've got resilience and inner strength until they're in certain circumstances. But also in the mental health field, where people may be in crises and start to struggle, is that capacity to manage their own raw emotions. And sometimes we call it, can become dysregulated, which means you can feel it, but it can spill out, and it can spill out into the family, and there's all sorts of dramas that can ensue. And for some people, those raw emotions can feel so huge and overwhelming that it can sidetrack them and absorb them in the nature of that. So to move into the strength card is, to me, I always get this sort of stillness around it. You know, it's almost like you become very still, and you don't have to say anything or do anything, but like you say, it's that inner well of reserve that you just feel and experience, especially if you can review what situations felt really difficult at the time. You know, it's not the first time I've had a leak in my house, and the last time I actually accidentally did some DIY and caused it, you know. And in that moment, the only thing I could think of is, how do I capture the water, as the ceiling was raining. But it's that past experience of, well, we dealt with it. Yes, it made a mess, and it looked like I had grey marks and bodies all over the ceiling, and I had to paint it. But we did it, and we dealt with it, and that can work out. And it's the inner dialogue sometimes that you need that will feed that strength and that stillness, capacity to deal with those situations as they emerge. Otherwise, you move out of that state and you become at sort of a victim to your emotional states, you're a victim to your rawness, a victim to these early mechanisms that, if we don't grow up a little bit, are going to trip us up each way every time something comes along and throws a spanner in the works, so to speak.
Yeah, 100%. Your inner dialogue will either be your greatest ally
Yeah.
or your greatest enemy, your greatest foe. And it's up to us individually to really work through those patterns so that we can make our inner dialogue our biggest ally. And it doesn't mean that the other dialogue won't come in. That's part of this human experience, is that ego inside of us that makes us want to be the victim, that makes us want to have the harder life, that wants us to stay put because it's safer here, but come to find out it's not safe at all. And it's just how the human mind kind of works against itself sometimes. That guardian we've talked about before, that guardian that sits inside of your brain, it's there to protect you, but inside of that protection, sometimes it can really harm, and it keeps you in places you shouldn't be, doing things you shouldn't be doing, and preventing growth where you could really start to shine if you walked past that guardian stating what it needed to state to keep you protected from the years of trauma that you might have existed within. So with the strength, you're really looking at yourself in a new way. You're looking at yourself in this way of saying, I have these emotions. How do I take these emotions and not only nurture them, because every emotion, including anger, deserves nurturing. I am convinced that anger is just the protector of usually sadness, or grief of some sort, so when anger steps forward, it's because you're not feeling heard. You can see something that's going wrong, or that something. And so anger's kind of like the guy, well, he's like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle behind you. He's ready to he's ready to fight, he's ready to take down the enemies and all of that. But if we dig a little deeper, we're going to realize that anger is named something else typically. And that anger was just a symptom of what it was that you were trying to get through, or what you're trying to understand. So, when we talk strength, we really are looking at trying to uncover the reasons why we have the feelings that we're having, why we need to acknowledge these feelings. What is that movie with the different emotions? Inside Out. And they separate out the emotions, and I really, when I was going through this part of my journey, I took that movie and I used it to represent my emotions. And when I began to almost create these entities separated, I could then say, oh, this is anger. But wait, anger is standing in front of sad. So I need sad to step forward, and I need to have a conversation with sadness. And anger typically will start to relieve itself so that you can go and have this conversation with your sadness, and then have that deeper discussion. And it's not like, boom, but it is a step forward in the right direction in your healing pattern on this journey.
Well, what you're talking about really is what most people can get, if they've got a decent therapist, psychologist, or coach, is the validation that all of our emotions are equally valid. And that you're right, it may be that we've got some that are more familiar with us because we've been allowed to express those. So the common one is expressing anger, or even in some way, some violence, as a way of diffusing the energy and the power and the force that you have in that. And often, sometimes it does often cover up sadness, because sadness is a tough place to stay in and reflect on, whereas anger is quite empowering. So rage and anger for some people can be quite empowering. So when they allow themselves to work out what that's about and release some of that, sometimes there's a sort of cost benefit of keeping it, because actually, do you want to go back to the sad place? Or so we need to acknowledge and validate those feelings, and in some cases have them heard if we've never had them heard.
Right.
And to allow ourselves, like with any polar opposite, if we've only ever been strong, where are we showing our vulnerability? If we've only ever been weak, where can we feel empowerment? Where can we express these, as you're saying, these different aspects? Because you can have the sad part of you related to that age. Often people can start to feel as they did at a particular age, when that emotion, especially when it's very strong, when it's strong and powerful, it's got a message for you, and we
Yeah.
need to hear it
Yeah.
and utilize it in the moment. Because otherwise, things that fluctuate, that come through us and move in an ebb and flow like the sea, if the waves are coming in and out. That's normal part and parcel of life, because we're not on this sort of static trend. We will have these mini ups and downs, but anything that comes up as a gush, unless it's an actual flood in your house, like,
Right.
literally, then attend to that, acknowledge that we're human and we will exist on this continuum of emotions.
Right. And when you do these things, it really can motivate you to use your anger as a new form of empowerment and not allow it to be destructive, because anger is there with purpose. And how we use that purpose is up to us. But there are very constructive ways, hence the strength card is a fire element. It can bring a new form of passion and allow that passion to become a constructive and not a destructive force within you. Now, I know that you had written down some stuff about the reverse, what it looks like when you're in reverse in this Major Arcana card.
Yeah, it's interesting, because the reverse really is about how you need to check how you feel in your own strength and your own levels of confidence and self-belief. And if your confidence has been depleted, or your energy feels depleted, so that can be an indicator that there's some work to do, and either realizing where your true potential is actually expressing itself to day, and you're living as though you're with your outmoded sort of beliefs about yourself. Or it could be that you're in a situation where there are people around you that are disempowering, are critical to the way that you are. So that will tap away at your self-confidence, emotions,
Right.
self-esteem. And if you've got somebody that's invalidating your experience, then you will start to invalidate your own. So it depends on what your own starting point is. But one of the key things it sort of says about the reverse aspect of it is that we need to be thinking about how we feel our energy levels. And just like what you said this morning, if you wake up and you feel heavy, like physically, my things manifest in physiological heaviness. Sometimes it manifests as a mental state of feeling off key, out of alignment. And then if you're not in the practice of checking that out and reflecting on that and working out, okay, where might this have happened? How was I feeling yesterday? If you're someone that's not really had any self-confidence and belief, then it's about doing activities and talking to people to generate that. So you've got some evidence, so you can be, as we're talking of, a podcast scientist in your own journey.
Right.
What uplifts me? What makes me feel confident? Where have I got some self-belief? So the reverse aspect of this card is a good way of sort of saying, where am I now? Where am I feeling empowered? Where am I able to recognize the emotional landscape that I exist in? Or am I in a limited space, as a child would be, only recognizing and admitting to feeling certain emotions? And when we look at emotions, there's only really fear and love. Everything else is a derivative of it.
It's a derivative. Yeah. That's the only two things that remain constant no matter what.
Yeah. So love will expand and open you up, and fear will contract.
Yep.
And so anything that makes you contract and go in on yourself needs attention. Anything that opens you up and makes you expand and immerse yourself in your own inner power, which is what the strength card is representing, then you don't really need to question that. You just want to know how you can get more of that, because we will
How
have
can I get more? Yeah.
How can I get more of that feeling of strength? And sometimes, because even though it's an inner power, sometimes we do need external experiences to validate that before we're able to take it on board and claim it. So, and it could be, where have I harnessed that in certain situations? Where have I maybe been a good friend or a good neighbor, or listened? Where have I held space? Because we were talking earlier about our experience of running groups. Well, one of the most strongest way of showing strength is by doing nothing and just holding space.
Just holding the space.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we have the full moon in Leo coming up, and I try not to date our podcast, but in that one of the questions we asked in the full moon in Leo is, where do I need validation? And you just brought up validation, because sometimes we do need this outside, this external validation and it's not that we need to lean in on it or depend upon it, but we are social creatures. And inside of that being a social creature, sometimes we have to ask for that validation. And where are my strengths? And allow somebody to give that to you, because it is nice to hear, and, with strength, it's not something that we're going to master overnight. Strength takes time. I personally, in my personal journey, am still working through a lot of what would be in the reverse strength, not feeling capable or it's not the readiness, it's just the capability, and sometimes I do need validation inside of that, and finding my inner strength, and acknowledging how far I've come and what I've been doing in this world, and why I'm deserving to take the steps I'm taking. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's beautiful, because we desire having some validity in our life, and having that validation really can shift the balance back to where it needs to be, so that you can step forward.
So before, I know that you always sort of think about some questions and give us a spread, but I think there's a couple of things that can help people that I think, and there's lots of things that can help people, but what springs to mind is, if you're having wavering moments of confidence and self-esteem, it's good to do a timeline where, say we started today, you draw a line right back to, say, it could be your early career or when you left home, and you put on your timeline all the points of where you've made some changes, went for a job, moved house, bought a car, all of those points in that timeline. If you want to do a career timeline, you put the jobs that you've gone for, and you write down the skills that you learned in that job, what made you be able to do that job. And what you do is, when you get back to the here and now, you look back and you go and you look at and gather up all of this, all of the skills, the attributes and the qualities that you harnessed as a result of doing those things. Because no one can deny you wouldn't be employed doing what you're doing if you didn't have some skills and some ability. Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
sometimes it's easier to do it through that. And then you pull that forward and you look at that and allow yourself to really sit and ponder and enjoy the journey that you've been on. Now, everyone can find something, whether that is you helped a friend move house. So what did you do? Make phone calls for them? Did you help them change their utilities over? Did you organize a group of people to do, a sit-in or have some food? So look at, it's those things that you have to sort of look at yourself. The other aspect that we do with professionals, but equally, you can have a look at this in all aspects of your life. So say we've talked before about, our role as parents, our role professionally. And even though they're compartmentalized to some degree, there will be some crossover. But we have in the clinical world something called the Competency Framework. So when I've worked with parents in the past, and they've been, struggling to sort of comprehend their whether or not they're a good parent or not. Okay. I've used the baseline because I've worked alongside social services. And so I say, what is the definition of good enough parenting? It's a phrase used within social care. And you say, okay, good enough parenting means this, this, and this. If we use a competency framework, we'd say, what skills, knowledge, and abilities and attributes do you need? And if you've got a box that's a framework, you'd have, this is what it means to be, say, a good enough parent. So where are you meeting those things? And then, okay, where aren't you? And where can you fill in those gaps? And where you're a bit wobbly, you can get some support, because everyone will come with something. If we're doing it from a clinical mindset, we'll say the same thing. Where are you as, say you're a meditation teacher, but you haven't had run many classes. Okay, so what's the competencies that are needed? So for a therapist, you need to be able to listen, reflect, summarize, contract, hold space, hear someone's journey, manage risk, do a good assessment. If you're looking at the next level of clinical attributes in the journey of, say you're working in psychiatric services, you need to be able to do a risk assessment, understand medication. So on this competency framework, it says if you're at this level of clinical work, you need to be able to do this. If you're offering this, you need to be able to do this. So you don't go, you're a good parent or a good clinician, or a bad parent, bad clinician. You say, what are the attributes, skills, and qualities I need in order to do this? And you do a realistic review, and you say, okay, where am I needing to grow? So do I need to do a course? Do I need to talk to a friend? Or do I? And those life reviews, journey reviews, system reviews, you can then not avoid by going, oh yeah, actually I was great at that. And it's good to do it yourself, because somebody else might try and point it out for you. And if somebody says, oh, but you're good at this, and you reject it and say, well, no, I actually am not, and you think you're not. Okay, so where is it that you've done that, and you help on that journey? And that is a beautiful way of people really starting to get some sense of self-belief and confidence.
No, that's perfect sense, because what I kept thinking is, this saying that goes inside of the spiritual community, or whenever you're working within that, is, focus on the light, not, focus on the things that are good, things that are you're proud of. Don't focus on the negativity. Don't focus on that. Then it becomes less emotional, and it becomes more like, I am so good at these things, and here is where I can improve, as opposed to, I never do this right. I'm always always focused on this. There's always negative energy. But because you're focusing on these things that you are good at, that you are positively growing within, then it allows this negative space to become more of a logical space. And then this logical space is easier to work through. For sure. Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah.
The only time to really take on board the not that is if I always think if something comes up in freeze. So if I notice something 3 times, or somebody mentions something 3 times, it might be that I need to pay attention to that. And it might well be that, I might be being impatient or frustrated. But actually, when we spoke last time, a couple of weeks ago, and I sat back and thought, yeah, I've been feeling really frustrated. However, rather than seeing that as a negative attribute, I thought frustration is often what I call the rub that creates the spark for the fire. That then, and what does fire do? It propels you forward, it lights your flame, gets your passion going, but it also transmutes and transforms, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's mindset and how we display it. We don't want to, what is that psychology rule? It takes 5 positives to get rid of a negative. And so, we're not here to say this is all love and light, but when you focus on the light, the shadow side doesn't seem so foreboding. You can be more analytical with it. We want to be emotional beings inside of this beauty that we are. But if we attach ourselves emotionally to the shadow sides, you're not going to work through a lot of these these deeper things that the strength that we're needing inside of this Major Arcana card really pushes forward for us. So yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.
So as per the norm, I do have a couple of questions that I think that if you're watching this, you should ask yourself. The first question is, how do you define strength? How are you taming your big emotions, much like the woman on the card taming the lion? How are you allowing outside of influences to affect your inner peace? And just like everything else, these questions are loaded. I already know this. That's why I asked them. These questions are going to present sub questions, more answers, might even bring in a little bit more awareness of why you're doing the things that you're doing, that can then lead you to a bigger why to ask yourself. And then, one of my favorite things I ever did at the beginning of my journey was just to start asking why. And until I was satiated, I didn't stop the why, but why? But why? Okay, you've got the answer, but why? And the further you get into that why question, the more you're opening yourself up to that subconscious level, to the things that we're trying to bury underneath the surface. So just ask yourself over and over the whys, write down the answers, go as far as you can, and then just be okay with the results. Don't judge the results, acknowledge and accept the results. And then you'll know from that point, just like Mel said, what can I improve upon? Here are my strengths inside of this. I see that some of these are faltering. What can I improve upon those to make those more of a strength? And we really can start working towards a healthy way of self-correction, course correction, in this healing journey that we're taking.
Yeah, and I
then,
think, sorry,
no, go ahead.
I think that's a good example of how you approach in terms of how you ask yourself questions. And I didn't tell you this, but I was listening to one of our earlier podcasts, and I recall you saying something about the different generations and you being part of the Y generation.
Yeah. Why?
Why?
That's so funny. We were just talking about the Y generation at my last brunch, and they're calling it, I want to say Zennials. And I was like, well, I accepted it as a generation Y, as in why in the hell are we, why is everybody like this? What is going on? So.
Exactly. It's exactly that. And it's either you ask the questions, or I think the other one that can be really key for a lot of people as well is how you're taming your emotions. And I certainly know that because with passion can be strong emotion, can't it? And how you're taming that. And I still have to tame some of mine because it's what drives me to do what I do, to be good at some of the stuff I do, but also it can be an Achilles heel that I've got to sit back and say. And if you understand it, then you can become at least accepting that, okay, I'm on this journey, and as long as it's not destructive and it's harming other people, and you're not causing chaos and havoc everywhere, I think if that is happening, then it needs more than a question. It needs somebody else to go on that journey with you.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of, the psychology field, is they are literally trained to be a part of that. And there's also workshops where you can get inside of, if you don't not comfortable or not financially ready to take on a therapist, there's all of these beautiful things. We are in the age of information. And anything you search is going to be readily available. Use your discernment that we've learned in the prior Major Arcana, and then step forward with that. There's just so many tools out there that can help you, so many people out there that can help you, and so many ways to receive that help. So, yeah.
There is also just one last thing, is when we've got very strong emotions, sometimes it's an indicator that we're not getting our needs met.
Exactly.
So if we're having a very strong reaction to something, it can be that we're very tired and we should have just said, I'm not up for going out today, and we forced ourselves to do something that we don't like. Or it can be a number of things, so it can be an indicator. So sometimes we need to go back down to needs level. We need sleep, we need rest, we need food, we need water, we need love, we need warmth, we need protection, we need a space, we need to be heard, validated, all of those. And if not, it's an indicator of something. So also to ask what's going on with that.
You begin to treat yourself like a plant, then you'll really start to see that it is important that we're fragile, and that we need watered. We need to have a certain level of sunlight. We need to have a certain level of peace. We need to have a certain size pot so that our roots can continue to grow. You don't want to get root rot from overwatering, or you don't want the leaves to fall off of this beautiful creation that is being designed because you are not, watering enough. So, treat yourself like a plant, take care of yourself, but outside of that, I think that everybody has this inner strength that we all talk about. And sometimes it feels like we don't, but in those moments, that's when you're going to truly find that strength. That is when you're really going to accept that this strength is truly within you, because you got up and you fought another day. And it can be hard. Of course it can. I mean, I've been there. I know Mel's been there. Sometimes it doesn't feel like you have an ounce of strength left in you, but that's the moment that you get this, super Saiyan power, and you just come up and you just do it anyway. That's the type of strength we're talking about. It's within you. It's possible. And the more you acknowledge that, the deeper the well of strength becomes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a beautiful note to end on, actually. So thank you.
Well, I'm so sorry. I got really excited. There is a tarot spread I did want to mention.
Yes,
and then 100% we're done. And so on the tarot spread, what I would like you guys to do, if you don't have the card, I would like you to do a search engine and look at the image of the card. Okay. And it's just called Strength. And you can just type out Strength Major Arcana and then go to the images and find it. I need you to focus on the image. And then I need you to, it's a 3-card pool. And it's very simple. It's your situation, your action inside the situation, and what the potential outcome would be based on the alignment that you are currently in, looking at that strength card. And it is going to open an entire world of questions and possible answers for you. Yeah, use the card spreads to your advantage. They're not here to tell you everything you need to know. They're here to open up your mind in a new way so that you can walk the path in perhaps a different pattern.
And then sometimes if you write what the meaning of the cards that have fallen next to the strength cards are, even if you don't understand it at the time, but you've read it, you can go back to that, because it may well be that something is appearing that you're not aware of yet. And that can indicate something that you're sitting in, as you rightly say, because we're not always aware of what it is we're sitting in. So
Correct.
Retrospect. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So outside of that, that's all I had, Mel.
That's fantastic. So
Okay.
it's lovely doing another card tarot Major Arcana experience with you, and I look forward to the next one.
Absolutely. Bye.
Bye.